Greetings, everyone. This is Payman Lorenzo, your host of the Leader Podcast. They have another wonderful, powerful, inspiring, empowering guest. My new good friend, Christine Lester from the UK. We're connected to one of my best friends that I met over the last few months, our common friend, Debra Blackman. And yeah, I had a conversation with Christine, was it last week, I believe? And we had a beautiful conversation and just a little bit about her. She's based in the countryside in the middle of England in an area called West Midland, and she's a strategic leadership project development expert. And she's doing a lot of powerful things right now. Some of the most, the one I just mentioned here, she, because of her vast experience in the world of business and in life, she taught at colleges, and she's currently writing not one, not two, but three books about her memoir, about her life, from the time that she was born and her journey up until the age of 11. She also has lived in many countries. Her father was posted in Singapore and Sri Lanka, and also she traveled. She did a fair bit of traveling on her own. So here she is. We're gonna talk about get to know her, powerful story, and her impact in this lifetime. So I'm very happy and delighted to have her to have Christine with us today. So Christine, my friend, welcome to the show.
Thank you for inviting me.
Pleasure's all mine. I'm excited. So first of all, tell us, how are you doing today?
Oh gosh, I've been up since 5 o'clock, so that's nearly 5-6 hours. I've written an article for LinkedIn about something I'm quite passionate about. So I believe in writing about what you're passionate about.
Mm.
So I've done that. What else have I done? Oh, answered loads of emails and got people waiting for some workshops that I'm designing with Debra. And also a lady in Australia. I'm doing one for her as well. So busy.
Busy bee. Busy is being busy is good. It means you're
Yep.
being productive, you're having an impact in the world and around you. And this is what we are here for.
Mm.
Awesome. So tell us, Christine, we're gonna talk about all the wonderful things you're doing in a moment. But for people who don't know you, tell us, who's Christine as a person, as a human being, as a woman, as a lady? Who's Christine?
I started out not being very well educated because of my traveling with my father. I missed the most important examination that you can have in the UK, which at the time was something called the 11 plus. So you took it from the age of 11, and that decided whether you went to a grammar school or whether you went eventually to university. So it was about streaming young people. And I think at the time the government thought it was a good idea. But I think in retrospect, it wasn't, because a lot of people were classed as failures. If they didn't pass the examination at the age of 11, then more or less their pathway was decided for them. And I was one of those. I came home at the age of nearly 15, and they didn't know where to put me. I wasn't quite finished with normal education. I wasn't considered good enough to go to college. My father didn't want to pay for me to go to university because he said, well, a woman, you'll get married, you'll have children, and I won't see my money. So that was it, really. He said, I tell you what I'll do, I'll offer you a year at the Secretarial College. I thought, well, if that's the only thing going. My careers officer at school said, you'll probably get a job in Woolworths, which was this international store that was known then. Yes, serving cottons and zips and so forth. Or that's it. There is no dream, no vision for you. So I took the year at college, became a secretary, and eventually a PA. I got to work for a lovely, lovely man who was a colonel of the Royal Engineers. I didn't know till he died and I went to his funeral. I didn't know he was the last man off the beach at Dunkirk.
Oh, wow.
And he was left behind to blow everything up that was of any use to the enemy. So apparently his famous saying was that he would never be allowed to have a holiday in France because the French would never forgive him for what he'd done. So
Wow.
he was a very charismatic man, and I was very lucky to work for him. In a way, he challenged me, but he also taught me a lot. I learned a lot from him about business administration, how
Mm-hmm.
to manage the practice. We had a practice of nearly 20 architects who, if they weren't managed, they would run riot.
Mm.
Planning applications wouldn't go in. Builders wouldn't have been managed, and the whole project would have been a mess. So it was sort of my job to keep all the administration side and the practice ticking over. So that's what I did. Then I had my son, who's the light of my life. He's now an architect, and I can't believe that he's gone back to the sector that I knew, but that was completely unforeseen at the time. So then after he went to school, I was sort of back into the market again, but what could I do other than my secretarial experience and the fact that I'd managed an office? I didn't have a lot to answer for, really. I ended up going part-time as a temp into the National Health Service and ended up a psychiatric hospital. Oh God, that was an experience, but that's a different, almost a book on its own.
I'm
I
sure.
worked for again a lovely man who was a consultant psychiatrist, and he again was a charismatic man, and again I learned a lot from him. Then I started the first community nursing department at that hospital. We had about 20 nurses who went out into the community and looked after patients who'd been discharged from hospital. Then I thought I needed a change, so I went to work for a hospice where we looked after the dying. And again, I learned so much there. I learned about courage, people when they're facing the last few weeks of life. Some of them dying too soon, leaving children and a husband. So I saw that side of life, but I also learned teamwork from the nurses. And I once said in the company of one of the sisters, I said, who cares about what I think? I'm only administration. And she turned around and she said, don't you ever say that, because if you didn't do your job, then we couldn't do ours. And I
Indeed.
thought that stayed with me. And I asked the matron that I actually worked for, she was my boss, I asked if she'd do a staff appraisal on me. And she said, well, no, I don't do staff appraisals on you, only the nurses. You have to get your immediate manager to do a staff appraisal on you. And I said, but I've never had one done, and I don't really know what my strengths and weaknesses are. So she said, okay, lock the door Friday afternoon. We'll make sure we get no interruptions, and we'll do a staff appraisal. So that was my first experience, really. And she said, one of the things I remember she said to me is, you tend to be negative. And I said, do I? She said, yes. She said, because when I say to you, we're going to do something new, your first reaction is, oh, that won't work, or we can't do it that way, or there's a reason why we shouldn't. She said, you have to be more positive in life. You have to look for the positive all the while. So I thought, okay, what do I do? She said, I don't want to lose you. You're the best PA I've ever had, but you have to go. You have to leave here. That was like leaving my heart behind, and I still think I left my heart there. My nurses were my team, and whatever I did was for them. So that was where I learned again an awful lot of lessons from them and from her. But that's when I ended up going to the psychiatric hospital and working for George, the consultant psychiatrist. But then I met another wonderful lady who had a big impact on my life. And I went for an interview for a part-time job, thinking it was more money and I could be more at home with my son. And she said to me, I'm not going to give you this job. And I thought, oh, okay. I'm obviously not good enough again, being negative, you see. She said, no, I want you to teach. And my first reaction was, I can't teach. She said, yes, you can. I'll send you to college. You'll get a qualification. It will take you 2 years, but that's a commitment from you. I said, okay, but what am I going to teach? She's just going to teach what you know, business administration. So that's how I ended up teaching the one thing that I was negative about, really. That also leads me to my passion, that I think everybody has something inside them that can be improved. That's the workshop that I'm hoping to do with this Australian lady. It's about personal development. It's about you taking charge of your own development. Instead of somebody saying to you, I think you should do this course or that course, or you should do this university or rather that university. It's about you having your own pathway and you deciding where you're going.
Wow.
And that's my passion. It's about letting everybody to see that there is a pathway for them that's individual to them. I've done an awful lot of talking.
No, it makes sense. It's a beautiful. I like that. We're gonna dive deeper into that. But first of all, I'd like to ask you a series of rapid fire questions to further get to know you as a person. Ready? All right. What makes you happy?
Oh, seeing people improve, seeing my grandchildren. I love them to bits.
How many
It's like
grandchildren do you-
starting just 2, but it's like starting life all over again.
Absolutely.
When you're bringing up your own children, you haven't got time. You're constantly rushing. But as a grandparent, you've got time to talk to them, get to know them, shape them, I like to
Indeed.
think.
You get to enjoy them minus all the hard work, all the late nights, all the non-sleep and all that. Yes.
That's it.
The best of
Give
both
them back
worlds,
when
really. Yeah.
give them back when you're fed up with them. Yeah.
You just get to enjoy the positive moments, but the negative, just give them to mom and dad. Here you go, that's
Yes.
yours. I paid my dues.
I'm absolved.
Absolutely. I've paid my dues, you know.
Yeah.
Awesome. What makes you smile?
I'm told I have got a sense of humour.
Oh, yes.
My boss at the architect say to me, your greatest asset is your sense of humour. That I've remembered. I've tried to make teaching or learning fun so that we have a laugh. I'm quite happy to share my mistakes, my barriers, what's gone wrong for me and what's gone right, but with a little bit of humour.
You know, this is incredibly powerful to make teaching fun, enjoyable, because no matter how old we are, whether you're 5 or whether you're 95, we all want to learn while having fun. If the teaching is boring, the student is going to zone out, you're going to lose them, and you're going to lose control of the class. I was a teacher. I did the teaching when I was in China. I taught French, English, football, Spanish. So I did whatever I could to make my class as enjoyable as possible, as fun, as entertaining, as interactive and engaging. Because if you're just talking like a boring teacher at the board, the entire class is going to be either snoring or talking among themselves or watching now with a phone and social media, watching videos on their phone. You're going to lose them. You can't control them. You can't really blame them neither.
No.
That's very important. Awesome. Now, let's take the happiness factor a couple of notches higher. What makes your heart sing? What sets your soul on fire?
Feeling I made a difference, and I'm still learning. Every day I'm learning something, and I want to learn. I have that passion. I don't know why. Whether it is because I felt it was denied to me, but now I soak up any kind of learning. If I've got to do something, I want to know the research. I want to know the background. I want to know who's saying what about anything. I can't leave it alone, and it's so I'm in an awful hurry. I'm in a hurry to do it, and every day's got to be packed with learning, because I feel that we all don't know what tomorrow will bring. We don't know whether we'll be here or not, especially in the way things are present in the world. Nowhere feels secure and safe. So we have to pack that enjoyment into as much as we can.
Indeed. Indeed. Speaking of that, what makes you sad and angry?
Oh, people inflicting pain, whether it be physical or mental. I hate to see somebody being put down just because they may think differently or act differently. I think maybe the time working for the psychiatrist again taught me that. He was a very compassionate man, and he never belittled anybody for their affliction. He always thought that by talking to them, and again that's something I learned, by talking to people, you get to know what it is, what is their issue, what is troubling them. I once had a very bad lad in one of my groups at college, and everybody gave up on him because he was a bad lad. By his own admission, he ended up in the police station every night on a Saturday night, and he said it was great because he got a good breakfast the next day. That was his attitude. But I had to go into class one day, and I said to him, he was goading me. He was trying to see how far he could push. And again, I got that from George, the psychiatrist. I could see what this lad was trying to do to get a reaction from me. And I just stood there quite quietly. And when he'd finished, I said, you can laugh, but what you don't realize is you're providing the entertainment. The rest of this group are enjoying what you're doing. But the laugh is that they will all pass their exams in a couple of months' time, and they will go out into the world of work. But you will be left behind to do your resits because you've been playing around. He did put his head, in fact, the next tutor to go in the class came out again, and he said, what have you done to that group? And I said, why? He said, they're working. I said, oh, right. He said, they've all got their heads down and they're actually studying. And the thing was, a couple of months later, he did pass his exams, and so did the rest of the group. And he came and knocked my door, came in just inside the door, and he said, I'm leaving now. He said, but you're not such a bad old bag. And I threw a book at him. I said, get out of here. And I said,
he said that to you, or you told them?
He said, no, he said to me, you're not a bad old bag. His tutor, you know.
Cheeky lad.
Yes, he was. And he ran down the stairs quickly, so I couldn't do anything about it, you know. But I just laughed. I thought, okay, I think that's a compliment.
Wow, that's a good one. That's a good one.
So yeah, I'm an old bag.
Now, what scares you?
Ah, dear, what scares me? Lots of things. Getting old, I think. Physically not being able to do. Well, I don't worry so much about the physicality of it, of getting old, but I worry about the mental. I don't want to lose my mental capacity.
Or being dependent
That's
on
why
others when you can, for example, go to just the basic thing, from going from your bed to your bathroom, you have to depend on someone. My father, when he was God bless his soul, he was 80, 79, he was still very fit until he got cancer. And one thing he always told us is, if you were to ever become dependent on others, do not keep him alive. That was his wish, because he was incredibly independent. Up to his very last moment, he loved going on walking, taking the train. We live in the countryside, to go in the big city. He would never allow us to drive him or anything or pick him up. He said, no, I want to go on my own. up until the very last moment. And he said, if I were to ever depend on anyone to do just the basics, if you love me, don't hold me, let me go.
Switch off. Yes.
And
Yes.
for me, I agree. It's the mental and the physical being dependent on someone else. That's the worst place to be.
Mm. I see so many people with Alzheimer's or
Mm-hmm.
some kind of mental incapacity, and I think that's got to be the worst, actually, because physically you can still do a certain amount, but mentally, if you can't remember your loved ones around you, that's got to be the worst.
Or some
I've got
people I know,
friends.
they can remember for a few hours and then complete blank the next few hours.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I've got friends who mostly women, would you believe, who are looking after the husbands.
Mm-hmm.
And they say it's so soul destroying because they see them, they feel they're losing them every day. They're losing another part of them, or they don't remember.
Mm.
That's I don't want, as you said, I want somebody to switch me off when that gets to that stage when I can't remember anything. Then switch me off.
Or if I'm not able to even take a shower by myself, walk, go to the bedroom, feed
Mm,
myself, because the
mm,
burden on someone else is absolutely not just a burden on them,
mm.
but deep down, it's killing you, it's destroying you. That you can't even do the
Yes.
basics. You can't function as a human being. Something as simple as basic as feeding yourself, washing yourself, or even walking,
Mm.
taking yourself from your bed to the bathroom.
Yeah.
That's the worst feeling
Yeah.
in the world.
And it must be awful to have to look after children in that
Mhm.
state. I did go to the Prime Minister's office a
Wow.
few years back, talking about women in business. Actually, I was part of a delegation to see if we couldn't change, make it easier for women to get into business and to stay in business. And one thing we pointed out was that women in business most often have children, so they have children who are dependent on them.
Mm.
But then more and more, they're getting, the older generation needs them. So you can have a woman try to run a business who's actually trying to bring up children, but she's also trying to care for her parents and maybe her husband's parents as well. It's just mind. I just can't imagine what it must be like to be in that position
Yeah.
and have the worries of running a business, and yet at 3 o'clock you have to switch off because it's time to go and fetch the children from school. That's we just have to do something that makes that easier. So that's again something else I'd like to do.
Yeah. I completely agree. It would be quite overwhelming to juggle all these different functions, all these different hats,
Mm,
spouse, housewife, chores in the house, taking care of the kids, running the business, or having a job, or even if you have to take care of your
mm,
parents or your husband's parents, that's way too much. You need to be
mm,
Wonder Woman to be able to manage all of that.
mm. It did actually happen to me when my parents were getting to the stage of, my father had cancer, my
Mm.
mother had Parkinson's, and
Oh wow.
eventually they both ended up in a home, and they needed 24-hour care. There's no way. My mother was totally bedbound, so my father had looked after her until he got cancer. So really, we couldn't have coped, my sister or I.
Mm.
But just visiting him and trying to keep my business afloat
Yeah.
was really difficult. It was not a time I'd like to go through again.
Oh no.
Um,
I hear you.
anyway,
Wow.
we've got quite serious. Have you got another question for me?
Yes, yes, we can. Yeah, let's talk about more positive, happy things.
Yeah.
Not saying that we discard that. That's a very important part of it, of our duty of all of us. Just like our parents took care of us when we were young, it's our duty.
Mm,
I strongly believe it's our duty as children, grown-up adults, to
mm,
repay the favor and take care of them. I don't know about the UK and England, but unfortunately in Canada, especially in the US, they just throw their parents in retirement homes. They don't want to take care of them. That's not my duty. I have other things to do. Whereas for me, the way we were brought up is that, listen, they took care of you. Now it's your duty,
turn.
responsibility to do the same. That's the least we could do. And I was blessed that I've been able to be there for both my mom and my dad. Both of them, especially my mom, she passed away quite young due to cancer. My father as well, just 3 years ago. I was there with my younger sister taking care of her. Because I was blessed, I have my own business. I was able to be a full-time caregiver for him. And and of course, my sister and my other sister were helping me as well. But I saw how incredibly demanding, overwhelming it can be. There's nothing worse that it can in the world when you see someone that you love dying slowly in front of you each day and you being completely powerless. I wouldn't wish it not even on my worst enemy.
No. But my father was quite autocratic. And really it wasn't until he got cancer that I saw the vulnerable side of him. Up until then, he'd been he who must be obeyed. he was a very, very strong, strict man. It was his background, his RAF background, that made him like that.
Was he military?
Yes.
Oh, that's
yes.
right. Then. Yeah.
RAF. He used to just say my name in a certain way, and I would know, that was it.
And you would answer to him, yes, sir.
Yeah, he used to say, Christine.
Yes. Affirmative, sir. Negative, sir.
We used to have to clear our bedrooms on a Saturday morning for inspection, and he would come round and inspect the beds had been made and the new sheets put on. And yes, the kit was laid out ready for inspection. Yes, he was a terror for that. But then to see him, luckily I saw him in hospital a week before and had a conversation with him, and he was actually quite low. And I had to pick him up. I had to say to him, "You're all right, Dad. You're okay. They're looking after you here. You'll be all right." A few days later, I got a call to go to the hospital, to the nursing home. And my mother said, "Oh, he's had a bad night. He's asleep." I thought, okay. So we whispered, because we couldn't wake him up. If we woke him up, it would be the end of the world. We would get a real, lesson in not to disturb him. But he didn't wake up. And what we didn't realize, he'd had already gone into a coma.
Wow.
And he was like that for another 4 days. And then he just suddenly woke up, almost as though he was going to say goodbye. And I was sitting there holding his hand, and I actually felt his heart stop.
Oh,
that stayed with me. I just felt it go bump, bump, and then nothing. And I thought, does that mean he's gone? And he had, and that was it. He just went quite peacefully, and I hope not in pain.
The fact that he had his loved ones around him, you were holding his hand, that's priceless. That's in a way, if there's any way to go, that's probably the best way to go.
Yeah, we stayed with him all night. The night that he actually, before he died. And then my mother turned around, and I suppose it's the age that when they've gone through wartime and all the other things that life throws at them. She turned to me and she said, "I expect you to do the same for me, Anything you do for him, you do for me as well." So I said, "Yes, okay, Mom."
Affirmative, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Would you like some fries and chips with and fish with the order, ma'am?
Oh dear, priceless, aren't they, parents?
God bless their soul. Seriously, parents can be hilarious sometimes.
Yeah. Do the same for me, whatever.
My father, he was also old school, and sometimes you really had to ask him something. For example, you wanted to give him something, say, "Do you want some tea, some cookie, whatever?" You had to ask him 3 times, because by default, the first 2 times he would always say no. That was his upbringing. The first 2 times, always no. Only the 3rd time he would say yes. And my mother always joked with him, say, when you go in front of the Lord and God, when he asks you, "Do you want to go to heaven?" Say yes the first time.
Oh, I love it.
I hope you
Oh, dear.
remembered it.
I will remember that. Yeah, I'll repeat that one. Thank
That's
you.
a good one. Yeah, that was hilarious. No
Oh,
matter
I hope
what
it's
you were
just
thinking, no matter what you were offering him, the first
yes.
two times by default was no, thank you, no, thank you. The third time,
Oh,
yes,
all right
please,
then.
thank you. I'll have a bite, and before you know it, it's all finished.
Oh dear, oh dear.
Whenever my mother was sharing that, even though it was like the 55,000 time, we'd all be rolling on the floor laughing, you know.
Yeah, it's interesting to look at our parents' marriage, isn't it?
Oh yeah.
My mother, my mother had never been out of her birthplace, not even 20 miles. She'd met my father when he was based nearby, as they do. And then when it came time when he wanted to go for us to go to Singapore,
Mm.
I can't believe that my mother actually got us onto an RAF plane, which is only a 29-seater, an RAF Dakota that was to take us to Singapore. It took us 5 days to get there. We had to land every night and stay in a different country.
Wow.
She'd never even been to London. She'd not been to places in her own country. And yet she got the courage and the tenacity to say, where he goes, I will go, whatever it takes. And I actually said that at her funeral. I said, she when we got to Singapore, one of my memories is of her getting off the plane and totally collapsing into my father's arms because she was just totally, utterly spent. He had to go before us, so we had to travel afterwards. And the fact she took 2 small children onto that plane and survived that 5 days.
Mm.
Emotionally and physically, she was just utterly wrecked.
You know, it was a
So,
different world back then in the times of our parents. The world was different. Traveling was not as easy, as accessible as before, as right now, for example. So of
yeah.
course, most of these people didn't get the chance to travel unless they were either in the military or, for example, my father, he was a geologist, archaeologist. So he was traveling all over the
Mm,
world on his,
mm,
job sites. But other than
yeah,
that, it was very, very difficult, very hard for the normal people to travel the world back then.
that's right.
So,
That's right. And even back then, or even now, families don't travel with the servicemen
mhm.
as a
Yeah,
normal rule.
yeah,
Back
yeah.
then we did. We were allowed to go as the
Oh, wow.
families of the servicemen. Um,
Mhm.
and funnily enough, I went back to Sri Lanka in 2005, met all the places that we'd lived in. And my first thought was, my father has gone by now. It's such a shame because I could have talked to him about it. I could have said, "Oh, we went back. I saw my bungalow. I saw where we used to live. I saw my school." Um, but he's gone, and I couldn't talk to any of them about it. It was
But
quite sad, really.
even though you couldn't talk to him physically, rest assured that he was right there beside you in spirit. He was seeing everything. He
Mm,
was rejoicing. He was reliving those moments, and he was beaming from ear to ear
yeah,
beside you in spirit.
yeah.
That I'm pretty
I
sure.
still, I still to this day, if I do something really quite exceptional, I think, I hope you're watching, Dad, because I did it.
Oh, he is. He is.
You didn't think I was capable, but I did it.
Like my father
But then,
always. Yeah.
sorry,
No, go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
no, I think maybe I'm too hard. I'm too hard on him. Maybe what he was doing was making me strong enough for
That's it.
a life without him.
Mm-hmm.
Challenging me. That was all he knew how to do. Which you think about it, is what they do in the forces. It's all about training and preparing the troops for whatever is going to come. Maybe that's what he was doing. The only thing
Yeah.
he knew how to do.
Oh, absolutely.
Um,
You know, for me, my father was a highly educated man, and I would love to have for him to have been here so he could see my books, so he could see
mm,
my podcast. He had written quite
yeah,
a few books, not only for his master's and his PhD, but also professionally. My sister still keeps some of his books in her basement. but I would have loved to see him, you know, with my books, even though he can't read, he can't speak English, he speaks only French, but it would have been amazing for him to see the book, you know, and that would have made him proud for sure, because he was always saying that. And of course, you know, the people that, you know, I strongly believe in past lives and soul contract and things of like that. I don't know what are your thoughts on that, but whenever the people that are, every person that plays any important role in our life, we agreed for them to be here, especially the people that are a pain in the butt, so to speak. Let's say someone that is tough on you, someone that is an enemy, someone that conspires against you. They are your great, at the soul level, these are your greatest friends, because they are helping you at the soul level to learn invaluable lessons, to grow, because that's what you chose to experience in this lifetime. At least from, if you look at it from a spiritual perspective, regardless of what religion you may be in, it's not about religion, but at the spiritual level, at the soul level. We all come here, even the person that's, God forbid, supposed to harm you or kill you, that's a soul contract, because your soul wants to experience that. And then in a future life or a past life was the other way around, you know?
Yes. Yeah.
Because the soul wants to experience everything.
I can't believe that we're not put here for a special reason.
Oh, yeah.
And that even when we've gone, something of us lives on. I once spoke to one of the sisters at the hospital, you know, and I said, I don't know why I said, I sort of out of the blue, I said, do you believe in an afterlife? And she said, well, I think everybody or everything gives a life to something else. And I thought, that is, yeah, that's true, isn't it? Because everything we do or everything we see, we pass on to somebody else.
Indeed.
So yes, we do give life to something else. I've often thought about that and the way she put it, and I thought, yeah, maybe that's the way to look at it. That we leave behind part of ourselves.
Yeah. Couple of things that I would love to ask you. One thing is, what is one thing that you did not value before that you're valuing more and more nowadays?
I think it's got to be education again. I think every country now in the world talks about the skills that they need, and yet we waste so much knowledge. We don't build on it. We're just constantly generating new stuff that we don't stop to think where the connection is with what we've learned in the past. There's a famous physicist died, I think yesterday. Professor Higgs gave his name to the Higgs boson collider. And I thought, gosh, to be a physicist and to think that whatever you have developed, they gave clips of him developing these great, what do you call them? Long strings of letters and numbers and minuses and plus and something over something else. And I thought, formulas, you know, I thought, to be a physicist and have that kind of knowledge must be amazing. And to work out, I don't know, the beginning of the universe, or, you know, things that we take for granted. Yes, we know the universe began, but we still don't know how. So, but knowledge is going to give us that eventually, hopefully. So yeah, I think I probably won't be around to see some of those things that come. I mean, who would have thought that we would ever have the internet? That I would be able to speak to people in Australia in real time and see them. You know, when I was a child growing up, you were lucky if you had a telephone.
Yeah.
And you certainly didn't have a television, not unless you were quite wealthy.
Remember those times when you had the telephone and on the back of the telephone you had a kind of a receiver for the other person to listen to?
Yes.
That was my favorite thing to do when my mom was talking to her friends. I would just sit behind and listen, and she would tell me, "Put that down, you clown." She would scream at me. Imagine
Oh
that. If you
God.
had told people, if you had told me or you back then, like back in the 80s or 90s, in the 80s, I was a young boy, that in the near future, you would be talking like me being here in Vietnam, you being in the UK, live, would say, this must be
Mhm.
sorcery or something like
Yeah.
impossible.
Yes.
But here we are.
And that we'd be able to develop projects
yeah.
without meeting people. I've just lost a gentleman in Italy, professor that I worked with on European bids. We collaborated, writing the bids, sometimes for ourselves and sometimes for other people. And it would take weeks and weeks to write a really successful bid. I never met him in real time. I never met him. I know that everything I sent to him in English, he would have to have it translated into Italian because he didn't speak English and I didn't speak a word of Italian, to my great regret. I wished I'd have learned to speak Italian.
Mhm.
But we collaborated right up until he died virtually. And I, as I say, I never met him in real life, never got to shake his hand. Obviously, I expressed thanks in all our writings to each other. But wouldn't it
Mhm.
have been lovely to have actually met him in person?
Absolutely. So I asked you, what is one thing that you didn't value and now you're valuing before, that you're valuing more and more now? And I would like to ask you the other way around. What was one thing that you let me see, that you valued before, but you're no longer valuing as much now?
Oh, you do ask some what hard questions. What did I value back then that I don't value now? I think it's probably twisting the question slightly, but I don't like malice.
Mm,
I don't like to see people being unkind, even in the written word. And I think talking about the internet, then that has enabled that bad side to happen. Sometimes I see that somebody's jumped onto a comment without
mm,
stopping to think of the words they're writing. I used to value the written word, but I don't value that kind of written word now.
mm,
I try to, if I respond to someone, I try to see that they may have written something in anger, and I'm not going to respond in anger. I'm going to try and I'll either ignore it and move on because it's not worth not worth my time trying to change somebody by the written word. But I do wish people would think more when they use words.
Speaking of that, some people when they angry, I've seen many different variations. When you're angry, don't respond right away. Count to
Mm,
10 and then take a deep breath and then see, or count to 10, or while trying to count, just like when you tell kids growing up, count the sheeps in your and the stars in your dream, something funny and cute. What is your approach when someone triggers you, when someone says something that angers you? How do you control yourself to not explode so you can be more poised and controlled? What is your approach? How do you handle that?
when you ask the question,
Mm,
I do everything I do does come back in pictures,
mm,
or I don't know why. It's just something always been about me. Um, but somebody did in one of the project meetings. She sent a message to everybody concerned with the project, and said Christine doesn't understand because she's not a teacher.
mm,
That cut me to the quick because I thought, yes, I do understand. Um, I have been a teacher. I have taught scallywags like that that young man. I do try to see somebody else's point of view. So everything she put on a personal level, it hurts. And I thought, I have to respond to that. I can't let that go. But on the other hand, how do I? So I did exactly what you said. I counted to 10 I actually closed the computer down and I thought, I'm not responding until tomorrow. I
Good.
think about it overnight. And if I'm still as angry, then I'll respond. I did respond, and I just said, I'd like to point out that you are incorrect in your assumption. I do have a teacher's qualification, and actually my teacher's qualification is dated probably before you were born. And I left it at that. I thought I give her due. She did respond with an apology and said, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said that. I didn't know. And I thought, okay, it's over. Next time I met her, which I had to within the project, it wasn't referred to. I think that's the only way of doing it, is actually, sometimes I refer to it as take the moral high ground. So actually rise above that kind of person. They are angry. There is something else going on that you may not know about. So rise above it. Wait. If you have to respond to put the record right, then you do, but in a measured way. But I'm no saint, believe you me. I do get angry. I do get upset. But I just try to see that there may be something else happening in their life at the time. And I'm just unfortunate to be the person that crosses their path at that time. Have you got any more horrible questions for me?
Oh, no. Fun questions. What would you say is your number one personal superpower?
I can only go by what other people say of me, and that's communication.
Wow.
I just love any form of communication. I just think there should be more of it. If maybe we all communicated more, then we would have more understand where somebody else is coming from. So yeah, my old boss, the architect I worked for back in the 1960s, I did say something to him one day about doing a management qualification. And he looked at me for a few minutes, and then he started to laugh, and he said, "You don't manage, Christine, you manipulate."
Ooh, that's a loaded sentence. Wow.
And I think by that he meant that I get my own way by moving around people, managing by getting them to do what I want them to do or what they need to do. Say managing, when I used to manage the practice, we had a few architects that were quite, let's say, I mean, they've all gone now, so I can say what I like, really, can't I? But they were quite artistic. They certainly didn't like to be told by a woman who was managing the practice. So I couldn't go in and sort of say, where is this? What have you done with it? We had one architect who used to like to take the plans everywhere with him. So he'd have the plans of a building folded up a specific way. There's only one way to fold a huge, great sheet of a building plan. And he would have his jackets made in Savile Row in London, because they had to have a pocket that would take these plans folded up. And he would take the plans everywhere with him, which was great, except that when we needed them in the office, we hadn't got them, and we didn't know where he was, and we didn't know where his pocket was, and we certainly didn't know where the plans were. So always my first port of call was, if we lost something in the office, was to go and see him and say, what have you got in your pocket? And treat it as a joke almost. I'd say, show me your pocket, please. What have you got in there this time? So I think that's what my boss meant by I manipulate people. I get them to do what I want them to do without them realizing it, in a kind way, I hope.
Powerful. Now let's switch gears. You like traveling, don't you?
I do, yes.
We can do an entire episode just on traveling. We may do that in a future episode, but for now, I want to take you down a different type of traveling, down memory line. Go back to when you were growing up. You know, when we're kids, people around us, family, parents, relatives, teachers, neighbors, always ask us, "Hey, Christine, what do you want to become when you grow up?" What does you answer that question as a young girl?
Oh, that's an easy one. My mother used to suffer terrible migraines, and she used to say, "Oh," she said, will you massage my head?" And that used to be my job. I used to go and she'd sit down, and I'd go and stand behind her, and I would massage her forehead and her temples, and sometimes her sides of her nose, and then I'd rub all her head for her. And she used to say, "Oh, you've got a gift with those fingers. You ought to be able to do something like that." And I had this idea in my head. I wanted to be a physiotherapist. That's what I wanted to do.
Wow.
But back then, you had to do the nursing first, and then you did a physiotherapist course afterwards. There's no way my father was going to have that. So I think to this day that whether it obviously brought her some kind of relief, but I don't know whether it was sort of something that you could replicate somewhere else. I don't know. It's something that physiotherapists actually do. But maybe a lot of the healers do, don't they? If you go to the Far Eastern countries, they do a lot healing with the hands.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So
Wow.
I don't know. I could have done that maybe.
You still can. Still young by heart, at heart, never too late.
Oh dear. Yeah.
What was your relationship growing up with school? Did you love school or did you hate school?
Oh gosh, I was unfortunate enough to be growing up in an era where it was corporal punishment. We had teachers with canes. My
Wow.
very first school was a convent, actually, and the nuns were the same. They would get the cane out or the ruler, give you a good smack around the head if you were talking when you shouldn't have been. I got the cane. I got the cane twice, and again, you remember it. In my case, the twice I got it was not my fault anyway. I just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, and I think the teacher, he was quite fond of caning people.
Wow.
I got the cane because somebody pushed me, and I fell off the edge of the pavement. So we all got the cane about that day, about 12 of us. And the cruelty was we were made to stand outside his office, and he kept us waiting for about 30 minutes because we knew what was going to happen. We knew we were going to get the cane. But it was part of the torture to make us fearful and be so afraid. And I do know on that occasion, my mother again screwed up an awful lot of courage and came down to the school and demanded to know why I'd been caned. What had I done that was so wrong? And it took her a lot of courage to do that, because she wasn't very. She wasn't very brave. She wasn't very. She had to screw up her courage to protest. She was quite a timid kind of person, really. But she did. So yes, I grew up with the nuns and the canes, and even when I was in Sri Lanka, the headmaster was going around caning people at the school there. It was just a regular thing. You just accepted it. I'd be horrified now if I thought, a young child of my age as I was then would get 6 of the best on each hand and not be able to use your hands afterwards. Awful.
Growing up in the late 80s in the south of France, we didn't get the cane, but the rulers, yes. And sometimes the teachers would take a pencil, slide it between our fingers like this, and crack it like this. Or for the boys, by the sideburns, like this.
Yeah.
Or the soft punishment was make us stand on one leg facing the wall at the back of the class. Or you just put your back against the wall, pretend you're sitting, but there's no chair under your butt, just on your chair, on your feet. And this was cruel. This was cruel. This was the most painful thing. It sounds easy, but no, it's not. So speaking of that, we went from one extreme to another extreme. Back then, teachers had authority. Teachers could scold, and even to some extent beat the kids. Nowadays, teachers have absolutely no authority, at least in Canada and the US. I'm not sure about the UK, but they have absolutely no authority. Teachers cannot even say anything to the students for fear of being literally fired. So where is the balance? What do you think is the best approach? Do you think it's best to give full authority to the teachers over the students' discipline, or is it more like the complete other extreme that we have now? What are your thoughts on that?
I think my initial thoughts are that teachers are there to motivate, and a teacher that can't motivate shouldn't actually be in the classroom. Even if you've got groups that are there and they don't really want to be there. I did have a group who were doing accountancy, and they were only doing accountancy because the fathers had told them that you never see a poor accountant. So I think it wasn't really a calling for them. It wasn't what they had chosen. It was what their fathers wanted them to be. So consequently, when they got to the college, they didn't want to learn. They just wanted to pass the time as quickly as possible and get out of there. And to motivate them, I do remember going into the classroom one day and saying, "Do you realise that you won't necessarily be the kind of accountant that accounts for people's books? Don't forget that film companies will have an accountant. You could be working for a television program. You could be the accountant who manages the budget for that organization." I saw the look of astonishment on their face, because all of a sudden, working in a television studios or a film company was a far more interesting career than just sitting, writing numbers down all day and working a calculator. So I think I got to them, and I think maybe they thought there were other opportunities that they hadn't considered. So I think that's the role of the teacher. I had another wonderful teacher when we came back from Sri Lanka. I went to this Catholic school. I was sent to this Catholic school, and because I was nearly 15, I was in the top class, the eldest of the school. And we had a wonderful teacher there who was Czechoslovakian. When Czechoslovakia was one country before it became separated, and he'd actually escaped from Czechoslovakia when the communists took over. As a young man, he'd escaped, and then he realised that the person he loved the most and was going to be, with a bit of luck, his future wife, she hadn't managed to get out. So he'd actually gone back into Czechoslovakia and got her out. And that inspired me. I thought, that man, he's been able to do that twice, and not just for himself. He'd managed to get somebody else out as well. And he told us this story not for any other reason, nothing to do with school really, but it was to inspire us that you can do something for somebody else. I thought the world of him. I'd never got to say that, but the fact that I admired him and what he'd been able to do.
That would have been an incredible story. I would have loved to have him on the podcast, share that story. That would have been a phenomenal story.
But yes, I think it's people like that have some kind of impact on your life. And I can recall that, 70 odd years later, the impact that he had on me, just his story, and balance his experience with him and the teacher, same school, same age period, but the teacher who made us wait outside his office so he could cane us. Two teachers like that in the same school is really quite. So even at that age, I could see the difference between one was good and one was bad.
Oh yeah, a teacher, especially at that age, can either make a student or a child, a boy or girl, either fall
Mm,
in love with a subject or make them put them off completely for life.
yes, yes, yeah. That's. I just hope that some of the ones that I've taught over the years, and the adults I've partnered with, it's not just about children. It's about when you're working with other adults. How do you collaborate? How do you
Mm,
bring out the
mhm.
best outcome for the project?
Yeah,
And you
indeed.
do have difficult times when you don't agree. Um, but you still have to think at the end of the day, it's the project that matters. The project's got to deliver. You've got to
Mhm.
just get on with the people that you've ended up with. I think
Indeed.
goes without saying.
Indeed. Speaking of school, what was your favorite and least favorite subject?
English was always. I do remember the same school I was just telling you about. The same school. The headmaster came in one day and he said he was actually going to dismantle the library because none of the schools were going in. The school children were going in to read the books. And he said, I bet nobody in here has read Dickens. And I couldn't help it. I put my hand up. I said, I have. He said, how many Dickens books have you read? And I said, all of them. And he turned to this good teacher and he said, I think I'm going to have to keep the library then. He says, because it's obviously somebody's reading them. But yes, I was fascinated with Charles Dickens. I thought his books were amazing.
Yes.
So yes, books have always been my greatest love. Even now, I'm sitting in my office and I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 shelves full of books, end
Wow.
to end of the office.
See,
Um, and a few years ago, books went out of fashion, didn't they?
yeah,
We all moved away from the written word.
it's so sad
Uh,
because, when I grew up, you could find me in two places, either at the library, on the football pitch, playing football.
mm,
You couldn't
mm,
find me anywhere else. I loved immersing myself and then lose track of time. I must have read by the time I was 8 years old, all of the book in the local library in our neighborhood.
yes,
I love book. I love
yes,
back then. There
yes,
was
I
no
do.
internet. There was no
Mm,
internet. There was no cell phones. There was no video games. Video games were for the wealthy, the computers and all
yeah,
that. You just add a book, a bicycle, and a
mm,
football, and
yes,
just that was your extent of
yeah,
your fun times. And I love and I miss those. I loved going to the library and getting another book and just devouring it and a week. I really
mm,
miss that from growing up.
yes, yes. I've still got, I think, 7 books by the side of my bed that
Wow.
either people have given me or
Mm,
even my son's father-in-law. He was a ship's captain, and so anything to do with the sea. So my connection with him is ships. The ships that I've been on, he knows. Um, he's younger than me, obviously, but he knows all the ships that I've been on. He knew of them. He knew what their history was, and he's given me his idol is Shackleton. So he's given me the book of the Shackleton journeys. I've still got that sat by the side of the bed. I keep dipping into it every now and again and reading a chapter, looking at all the pictures. And I think again, you can, in your mind's eye, when you in a book, you're lost. You're in that book. Say, for instance, Shackleton's book. I'm actually trudging across the pole. I don't know if this is south or north pole he went to, but I'm actually there with him. I'm experiencing that. And I think you
mhm,
only get that from a book because your imagination takes over. And instead of
mhm.
somebody picturing it for you, your mind is picturing it.
Yeah, indeed.
I
Wow.
think books are so important.
Oh yeah. And also, I don't know if you remember back then, the books had a very distinct smell. The
Yes,
smell was incredible. You could feel it. It's almost like I can't describe it, but you knew the book, the smell. They don't
yes.
make books with that kind of amazing, almost like addictive smell nowadays.
No, I don't know
Nowadays,
what it
books
is.
have no
Mm,
smell. No smell. Back then they had
no,
this very distinct, pure, raw.
I think it was maybe because they were bound, weren't they? They were bound in get a you know, when you go on Amazon and you go to choose a book, do you choose the hardback book or do you use the paperback?
Paperback, yeah.
Yeah. Now I like the hard book. If
Mm,
I think it's going to be a book that I'm going to keep, it's a reference book, then I
yeah.
want it hardbacked.
Yes, yes,
And
yes.
I'm looking up now to see how many books of mine are hardbacked, and quite a lot of them are.
Not
So
just the covers, but the pages had a very distinct smell, almost
yes,
like a scent, you know.
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
sure you're feeling it right. You're feeling it right now.
yeah.
I can't describe it. Very natural, organic, incredible, beautiful smell.
Have you ever been to Ross on Wye
To
in
where?
the UK? Ross, it's
I
called
haven't
Ross
been to
on
the UK.
Wye.
I haven't
You
been to UK
haven't?
yet. No.
Oh, well, if ever you do, you
Yes, I
must go
will.
to, there is this place in the UK called Ross on Wye, and it means, Ross means the town name of the town, and on Wye means it's on the River Wye. But if you
That's
go there, it's called the book capital of the UK, and they have book festivals and they have world international book festivals as well. And they broadcast programs from there. And if you walk down the street, nearly every shop is the bookshop. So
wow.
you would be in your heyday there,
I
and you
love
can
that.
smell the books there. You can smell
Ah,
them.
love that.
Um,
Love that.
and I just, once I get there, I go in and I'm looking for old books.
How do you spell it? So RUSS?
ROSS.
Ah, okay, Ross. And the second word?
Ross on ON with a dash on,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
then dash WYE.
Okay, so Ross dash ON dash YA.
WYE.
WAY.
No, WYE.
Ah, okay, okay, okay. I get it. Okay, okay. I'll check it out. Okay, beautiful. Thank you. Appreciate that.
That's all right. I've given you something.
Oh, yes, always.
You've given me your time. I've given you Ross on Wye.
Absolutely. Hey, listen, I definitely want to go to the UK whenever I am going. I will remember that and I will give you a ring. Say, hey,
Yeah,
Kristen,
yeah.
where are you?
Don't
We're
just
gonna.
go to London. Don't just go to
No,
London,
no, no, no.
please.
I want to get
No.
out of London. I will go to the, as we say in French, to the deep England. The villages and all that.
Yes.
Definitely we connect. I've been blessed to
Yeah.
meet some amazing friends over the years to my podcast in the UK. Of course, you, Deborah, another
Mhm.
wonderful gentleman. He's in Ireland, John Donnelly. I don't know if you know him.
Oh, no, John. Yes. Yes.
He's
Go
probably the
to all
most
these
connect.
events. Yeah.
I love to teasingly tell him that outside of the royal family, you must be the most connected person in the UK.
Yes. Yes. He probably is. And the most generous man.
Oh,
He
absolutely.
you go on one of his events and he makes sure that he welcomes you and makes you feel at home. He connects people. He doesn't ask for a reward. He's
No,
just amazing. Yes, I love John to
absolutely.
bits. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I have a couple more questions to ask you, and we're gonna call it a day for today. It's the end of part one. But before I do, imagine that we were in the same class in grade 10, grade 11. What kind of student were you? What kind of girl were you? Were you the shy one, the quiet type? Were you the life of the party, the chatterbox? Were you the nerd? Were you the superstar?
Uh, I think I was still trying to please father. So
Mm,
I was up there with the top few. Not so much number one, but sometimes I
mm,
got to number three. Maths
mm,
I was very poor on. I'm ashamed of my maths. I just never. My father once tried to explain maths to me, but I still didn't get it. And his way of doing maths was not the way I was being taught anyway. So that didn't help. And I ended up in tears. That just
mm.
totally frustrated me that I couldn't understand it.
Yeah.
So my maths was pretty awful. I started to learn French in Sri
Wow.
Lanka, would you believe?
Wow.
But then when we came home, we didn't do French. French wasn't in the curriculum. So although I still can pick up words in French and I can understand when they think I'm not listening or I don't understand. I do. So French I loved. I did love that, and I think when I came to do my family history, I found out that actually we are French descent.
Oh, wow. From which
My
region?
father, I'm not sure because again, all I know is the family name was Pignon,
Oh, yeah, that's very French. Yeah.
very French name. And my father always said he didn't know where the connection was. But again, I found it after he died. I found when I was doing the family history, and it was his grandmother. It was just so close to him, and he'd obviously never talked to her about her French ancestry, or she never mentioned it. So he went all the way through his life thinking he'd got French ancestry, but he didn't know who it was. So
Wow.
again, we go back to intergenerational learning, don't we? If he'd only talked
Indeed.
to his grandmother, he would have found out.
Wow.
So yeah, I liked French when I did it. I loved English. I think that's where I get the communication from. And for
Yeah.
me, it's English literature, not just English language. It was English literature I loved, and the books. I didn't get into trouble other than getting caned twice when I shouldn't have done. I did manage to keep out of trouble.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, have you ever done Myers-Briggs? Have you done the
Yes.
Myers-Briggs person? You've
Yes.
done, yeah.
Yes.
Well, I came out as an I.
I don't
I'm
remember
not
that.
an E.
I did it way back, maybe 15 years ago when I was still working in corporate world in Canada, but
Mm.
I don't remember it.
Now, I've been
Yeah.
talking to Deborah about it. We're going to do a workshop around
Ah.
using Myers-Briggs. So yeah, when I did that, I suddenly found out what I am as a person, and I'm not an extrovert. I am actually an introvert.
Mm.
And the tutor that did the Myers-Briggs test on me, I said, no, that can't be right. I've got to be an extrovert. Surely everybody tells me I'm an extrovert. He said that's
Mm.
because you're pretending to be an extrovert. He
Okay.
said you're an introvert, but you pretend to be an extrovert, and
You're
that
an
I
introvert,
think
extrovert.
that's true. Yeah. So
Okay.
what kind of student was I?
That answers the
Okay,
question. Yeah.
I suppose.
So growing up in your schooling years, were you popular with the boys?
Uh, yeah, yes. We did a lot of plays at school, and
Mm.
I remember doing a play, uh, Mr. Darcy. One of the boys had to play Mr. Darcy, and I was forgotten her name now.
Mrs. Darcy?
In the yeah, I that was a yeah, that was quite difficult because we had to do a lot of practicing and then we had to perform the play.
Mm.
So I did used to get asked to do some acting, which I think helps when you come to do teaching, because I think teaching is a lot of it is acting,
Sure.
isn't it?
Absolutely.
You put on a display when you walk into the classroom, don't you?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Wow.
So I think yes, acting again is I don't think I could do it now,
Hmm.
but yes, I used to do quite a lot of that. Um, yeah. So
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
Awesome. Now,
Gosh, you're getting some stuff out of me.
oh, yes. And one more thing. Do you
Yeah.
remember what was your very first job? And do you remember how much you got paid the first time you worked?
Oh yes. Gosh. Um, First job after I left college. Oh yeah, I was just the junior in the office, so I had to make the tea. And the most important job I got was the switchboard.
Mm.
And it was in the days when you had a plug in, and you had to plug in the
Connect.
external
Yeah.
line, and then you
Yeah.
had to connect it to the department that they wanted to speak to. And I was
Ah.
always getting it wrong. And
Sending the
all of us,
president to the janitor to the president.
the men were always arriving at the side of my switchboard and saying, "You cut me off. Where's it gone? Where's the client gone?"
Hey, I really hope you did not connect by mistake the wife of the boss with his lover, this lover. You know, that's a different no. Or his mistress.
Oh dear. But yes, in those days, it was actually quite, if you could manage the switchboard, you could say you were GPO trained. That meant you'd
Mm,
been trained by the post office to use the switchboard systems. And it was quite to give it to a junior was quite a high, they held you in high esteem if they thought you could manage the switchboard. So I did manage the switchboard for about a year.
mm,
And with the help of a lovely lady who was the telephonist at the main office, which was only about 2 or 3 miles away. But she was the bee's knees when it came to telephony, and she
mm.
used to quite often come on to me and say, "You're talking too loud, or you're talking too soft. I can't hear you," and you cut yourself off there when you were speaking.
Wow, fascinating, fascinating. I love talking to you. I love listening, hearing those kind of stories. We definitely have to do part two. Let's call it a day for today. If someone wants to connect with you, Christine, what's the best way to do so?
I think LinkedIn mainly.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Your
LinkedIn I
name
tend to use more than anything.
and look for Christine Lester. Yes, okay. I'll
Christine
put it.
Lester, yes. FRSA. I got letters after my name.
Oh, wow. Amazing, amazing. All right, Christine, I salute you. You're truly with a heart. I love listening to you, listening to your tales,
Oh,
your
I hope I haven't
stories.
bored you.
Oh, hey, listen, this has been 2 hours of amazing conversation. Usually my episodes, I cut them at 45, 50 minutes, but this was because it was so beautiful. I kept it going,
Oh, bless
because
you.
again, seriously, I love listening to beautiful stories, reminiscing, a time that was so beautiful back then in the 80s. Well, I was born in the early 80s, so I wasn't there before, but still, the early 80s was a special place when I was a young boy.
Gosh,
So,
my son is older than you.
oh, really? Wow.
Yes. Ah, yeah,
So
he's
I'm a little baby.
1975.
I'm 80,
Yeah.
1980. So,
Uh,
yeah. Wow.
yeah, he's
Awesome.
5 years older than you.
Yeah. So I salute you. You're truly with the heart. Keep shining your light. Keep blessing the world. Your presence,
I
your
will.
impact, your wisdom, your smile, your sense of humor, your cheekiness, even.
But
And
I'm an old bag.
oh no, oh no. Stay safe, stay awesome. God bless you. And I'm very much looking forward to our next conversation soon. So take care. God
And me.
bless.
Take care. And
And
you.
have it. Take care. Bye bye.
Bye.